when we're saying, well, we can't look at what's happening to women as women's issues, then they're being marginalized. Yes, because women are marginalized. We have to say this is a humanity issue. Women are the doorway between the world of spirit and this three-dimensional world of human flesh. We are the doorway. All life comes through us. We are the seed and we are the garden.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the Good Space Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a phenomenon called family mobbing. It's where daughters and families are estranged or shunned and singled out because they don't follow the family's explicit or implicit rules. If you loved our episode about being an adult child of emotionally immature parents based on the book by Lindsay C. Gibson, then this episode is absolutely for you. We're going to be talking about a book called Daughters Healing from Family Mobbing with the incredible author Stephanie A. Sellers. She holds a doctorate in Native American Studies with a focus on women and gender issues. She has been on the faculty at Gettysburg College since 2000, during which time she was the inaugural director of the Women's Center from 2009 to 2015. Sellers has been a volunteer counselor advocate in shelters and a community organizer for decades. In 2007, she was mobbed by one side of her family. Sellers lives on a homestead in the mountains of Pennsylvania with her Welshman, a husband, and a corgi, which corgis are my absolute favorite dogs, so made me so happy to read that. And she has heritage breed-laying hens, a cottage garden full of antique jonquils, parrot, tulips, and medicinal plants. It sounds like heaven. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Francesca.
Your life sounds so peaceful. And again, corgis are my favorite dogs. So what color is the coat?
He is a tricolored Pembroke, is incorrigible in wonderful ways.
I love it. Yep, that's definitely a corgi. The tricolors are my favorite. So that's amazing. All right, so let's just hop into it. So your journey is an inspiring one because this all started after your family shunned you for not complying with family culture and constraints. What did that feel like then, and how do you feel now?
In the work, I do not disclose which side of my family. So I do just want to add that for their privacy. For one side of the family, shunning, how I felt at the time, of course, was in complete shock. Daughters tend to think that something dramatic and extreme has to happen in order for families to turn against their daughters. It really does not have to be non-compliance with family rules. Non-compliance with the family script is typically a reason for the shunning. And it was so many years ago at this point. Now I really just reflect with profound compassion for everyone involved about what happened. I have insights about why those events happened. And I look at my own life and the lives of so many women that I've spoken to and understanding how individuals can really be harmed from the mobbing itself. So it seems that folks who are doing these actions of mobbing are unaffected and that it is the target who's traumatized. And of course we are, but we have to understand that it is reciprocal and mutual. So this is a profound loss for everyone involved, and healing for targets, for myself and for the biological kin who could do such a terrible thing is necessary for both sides. So I think that over time, it is the reflection of the magnitude of what has happened and its impact on everyone involved, particularly the innocent young people in the family, that we often tend to focus on the initiators and perpetrators and the bystanders, the adults who participated in mobbing. But there are innocent young people, not just children, but young adults who are profoundly wounded, confused, cut off from, sometimes it's their mother who's being mobbed, and children are turned against their mother, their aunties, their grandmas, their sisters. And so thinking about the impact on those young people has been part of my journey and a part of the journeys that I see other women taking of and being available and open to any possibility for reconnection with these innocent young people in the family.
In your book, you define family mobbing as a group act of aggression that targets a family member, typically daughters. It can be typified by a single act of violence or a pattern of abuse over years, whether isolated or long-term. Mobbing enforces the family's domination and control over another. I wanted to speak that because as you were talking about what mobbing can do in the family, I thought probably good to kind of just point out what exactly is mobbing. And I know it happens often when a daughter breaks a family rule. And what I gathered from your book, it can also happen to men as well, but more typically a daughter. So can you give us examples for those listening who are curious if they're being mobbed or if that's something that's manifesting in their life? So what does that look like and how would you know that it's happening to you?
Well, I think looking at what I've called the cycle of abuse is a pattern that we typically understand in adult partnerships. So spouses, sweethearts, and so forth. But we don't understand that the cycle of abuse happens with families and a scapegoated child in the family, a child or an adult. And what happens is if you find yourself that after interactions with the family, there is something disturbing and upsetting, you try to reach out and resolve it, talk about it, how you're getting the response from family members of that didn't happen, denial, reversals of what the experience was. And this is happening over and over. What it is then, the target, the daughter's often trying to figure out how to manage this. And then they get back into some type of equilibrium again. But the crisis has passed, things have cooled down, the family has stopped gossiping, stopped turning it into a crisis, and it cools down. Then, of course, it happens again. Then there's more escalation and attacks and slander, saying that the daughter is making things up, that she is crazy, that this is then understood broadly in the family, that this is part of who she is as a person, that she is problematic. This is part of the scapegoating. This is happening in the background, though. So the target is going around and around the cycle of abuse over and over again. This isn't mobbing yet. But what will happen is then the next step from this chronic cycle of abuse, which, we can imagine is absolutely confusing, exhausting, interrupts her life, her functioning in her life with her spouse or partner, her work, her children, just with herself, constant confusing maze of real anguish. But that's not quite mobbing. Mobbing is the next step of then the family begins to act out. She's getting now cold shouldered. Now she's not being invited when she is included. People are acting out again, giving the cold shoulder, glaring, sneering, turning their backs. This will be to her spouse, her partner, and her children can all be included in this. And we see there will be folks who are actively participating in that behavior. And then there will be biological kin in this family who they're not quite acting out, but they are participating more passively. Then you have folks, again, out in another layer who are still talking with her, perhaps, emailing, phone calls, in person, smiling, waving, chatting, but they are clearly participating. This is what mobbing is. When, daughters or individual targets then attempt to say, what is going on, what is happening. They are commiserating on the telephone with perhaps an auntie, an uncle, a cousin, a sibling. And these folks are saying, oh, yeah, I saw that. Oh, yeah, that was pretty bad. Oh, yeah, that was really awful what happened. And, they're commiserating and so forth. These folks are not going to stand up and say anything, unfortunately. They're not going to break the rules. They're going to fall in lockstep with the group identity. And the group identity, which is getting into a deeper understanding of what's going on here, is this attempt to protect something fragile in the family system. A deep wound, psychologically, intergenerational trauma, secrets, something in the family that is unspeakable. And just as any of us would pull our broken arm away from someone rubbing against it, the family's going to close their walls in and protect this wounded, unresolved, perhaps even unconscious suffering that is part of their family identity. And this very much is often what the daughter or son or genderqueer person has, hinted at or suggested by so-called stepping out of line. And that could be just saying, why is grandpa falling into the Thanksgiving table drunk every year? Oh my, that could be absolutely an unspeakable thing, and so forth. So this is some ways it can unfold.
So it just sounds, it is a very complex and layered matter. And I know it must be so easy for the person being targeted to feel like, am I crazy? Am I doubting this? Is this really a problem? Because when you see multiple people being complicit in something, I imagine it would be a question mark about what's happening. And then obviously being gaslit by people around you or other things. And so it's just incredible that you were able to name and define and point this out, because I know that so many people have had this happen. And that's where you created the community Sedna's Daughters. And that's where women found you, right? To discuss this phenomenon that was happening to them. They thought they were crazy. They thought, okay, what do? I feel so alone. So can you tell me, first of all, what is the significance of the name Sedna? And then how did these women find you? Because if this term wasn't defined or called out or just put in the light like you've done for it, I guess I'm wondering, how did they know where to find you?
Sedna is a deity or goddess among the nations of the Arctic. So we see her stories. There are many, many stories. So in Northern European countries, Greenland, Iceland, we see some indigenous nations of the Americas, again, the northern nations, who have stories about Sedna, or by whatever name in their culture she is referred to. And this is the story, a culture story about a young woman who flees. She disobeys her parents. She flees and they come and get her, and they're in a kayak. And they're going out to sea. They have the daughter in the kayak, and this great storm sweeps up. And the parents believe she has caused the storm by her disobedience. And so they throw her overboard into the ocean. Well, she clings to the side of the kayak to not drown in the ocean. And the parents get out an axe and they hack off her fingers. And she sinks into the ocean, where she is transformed by the great mystery into divinity, into goddess, into great divine creatrix. And her severed fingers become the whales of the ocean, the dolphins, the seals, and so forth, these really beautiful sea creatures. And she is now, there existing with these teachings of transformation. So, of course, the cultures who have these stories have many different meanings from it. But when I read that story and understood about my experiences, I thought, I've heard this story over and over, the story of being scapegoated as a daughter. I'm going to take out a little ad in a woman's magazine, and the magazine was Sage Woman magazine, and just put it in there and see what happens, because I'm going to start creating a web page. I'm a very low-tech person. This was an enormous reach for me, but I can follow directions and click. So I did that and created this website. When the ad ran, 200 women it was like instantaneously responded and went to my website. And then the stories started pouring in. And I thought, this is a movement and I need to be a good listener and start to gather these stories. And that's really what my book is. My story's there. I'm a researcher. I'm an educator, and I did that work, but my voice is just one in the collection of stories. Stories are what change cultures gently, gradually, step by step. Stories reshape the way we live, the way we think, the way we are conceptualizing who we are as a people in this world. So all these women's stories together, and now Francesca, you have invited me to share a story, and you are part of the storytellers. We are doing this work of transformation in whatever small and great ways that we can. So Sedna was also named a planet. Sedna is a planet at the far reaches of our solar system. It was spotted, 15 years ago at the NASA observatories, named Sedna. She has an 11,000 years is her orbit, and she is headed to Earth. So I didn't know this at the time that I named Sedna's daughters or knew about the goddess. And I thought, how beautiful that this is happening. She's coming close. And what is she going to teach us? I can't wait to find out.
Me too. I got chills when you were saying that. And I agree about storytelling. And I'm so glad that you are pioneering that and giving women the space to tell their stories, which brings me to this really powerful part that hit a chord of truth that rang so pure in my heart. It was when you said, and if you don't mind, I'm going to quote just a chunk of it. So you said, calling human violations women's issues is a way of minimizing social responsibility to educate and intervene to stop them. How women and girls are treated in the families in which they are raised is the litmus test of how well the overall culture is functioning. And then you continue with, what happens to women and girls eventually touches everyone in their personal circle and their community. Ultimately, that means what happens to women and girls impacts everyone. That I'm like, that should be posted everywhere. That is the truth that I felt from that is just, it hit me to my bones, to my core, to my whole being. It was so powerful. And so I'm curious to know, what is it about labeling something a women's issue that makes society not want to intervene and educate?
Thank you for that. Because, of course, females are subjugated and marginalized. This is in recent millennia. This is not since the beginning of time. That is a lie that we are all told, because the centralization of women and girls, understanding that not just, of course, our biological reproduction, but our psycho-spiritual existence, and that we are culture bearers and are the continuation of cultures and memory of our cultures, that has to be marginalized if you're going to, of course, attempt to control women and girls. And so by bringing them center and understanding, look back at that history, looking at the historic record, looking at primary source documentation. I'm a scholar, and we need to have evidence for things. And goodness, it's all there. It's just kept in the background so that we are not clear that this centralization of women ever happened at all. So why we call them women's issues and nothing happens, because we are understood basically as not mattering that much. Of course, we have to ask, well, where is the evidence of that? It can't just be an opinion or a perspective. We can look at the hard numbers for that. If we want to look in politics in the United States, the contribution and participation of women we still are running at paltry numbers. We have the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies who are women is typically still under 5%. And all these measurements in terms then, of course, the high numbers of violence against women, the domestic and intimate partner violence, how we're treated in the medical system. I mean, we can look at every category and arena for hard numbers, looking at the data. when we're saying, well, we can't look at what's happening to women as women's issues, then they're being marginalized. Yes, because women are marginalized. We have to say this is a humanity issue. And it's not just a humanity issue, it is a whole earth and a whole biosphere issue as well. Women are the doorway between the world of spirit and this three-dimensional world, our world of human flesh. We are the doorway. All of life comes through us. We are the seed and we are the garden. We are bringing that life here. And it is not simply biological reproduction, but as I said, it is a psycho-spiritual, and it is a culture that we are continuing, and the lineage from, of course, our ancestors. So, yeah, that's why we can't just call them women's issues. It's human issues. Everyone suffers because of this. Everyone does, not at the same rates or the same levels. Everyone suffers from these problems.
The information you're hearing is what I wrote for our daily email, The Good Space Daily. So if you're already signed up, you'll have these tips in writing in your inbox. And if you're not already signed up and you're listening to this after the fact of us dripping them out live, we'll make it so that when you sign up, you can specifically ask for these emails and get them dripped out to you when you sign up. And that's the same with all the other topics and themes that we'll be covering for Feeling Your Best. So if you want to get these short daily reminders to access your authentic self in all areas of life and get resources, chances to win things, all of the good stuff, then make sure to sign up now. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to findyourgoodspace.com. This might be too big of an ask, but listening to this, I know there's implicit bias in our culture, right? Like everyone probably perpetuates this in some way or another, not knowing that they're doing this. So my question is, one, how do we start to unravel that and see it and not keep perpetuating it? And then even for like myself or other women who might be in rooms or situations where they're like, I don't know if this is happening because of an implicit bias against women. Because sometimes I feel like it's hard to tell. And so how do I know I should say something, or do I just not say something and I remove myself? Or like, what's the nuance behind dealing with these situations? Or is that even the answer to changing it? I guess I don't know what we can do to make sure that this doesn't keep continuing.
When women begin to center themselves in their own experiences and understand their bodies and the cycles of our bodies, our menstrual cycles, our pregnancies, if we bear children, our menopause, whenever that comes, if that comes at 30 years old from a hysterectomy, you're a grandmother then, doesn't matter about biological reproduction. When we begin to center ourselves, not just in that, but in our intellect, our voices, our talents, and know in the most fundamental of ways our own preferences, that seems fundamental to the point of being perhaps absurd. But American women, we are taught as toddlers not to have our preferences and certainly not to act on them. So how do we know? I think that if we are in a situation in our personal lives and we are feeling badly about something does not feel right, and we begin to inquire about that with our partner, our spouse, we begin to ask our trusted friends, and we're getting feedback from them. We begin to reflect. That is a strong place, our internal knowing, and then bouncing that off trusted people, and then perhaps reading. A book can change a woman's life. Begin reading and seeing how others reflected, our ancestors reflected on this type of situation, and then begin to act. So how we begin to unravel these patterns in our culture, centralizing ourselves in our own experiences, what women and girls are not supposed to do. We're supposed to centralize male opinion, male thoughts, male needs, and most importantly, male authority, socially and religiously. that we are to give our voices up and over to that and not see ourselves in divinity. So what we do is when we begin to undo that and see ourselves, our bodies, our minds, and our voices as having legitimacy, strength, validity, looking to what is divine and sacred to us in our lives and saying, I can see myself there. I can see the form of femaleness as sacred. That too is holy. That's when we begin to shift and turn. And of course, women and people have been doing this work for centuries. And this is why we are where we are now, which is radical transformations in many ways. So we are at our place in this important story of being a human being. And we are doing, Francesca, you and me and all of the people on our planet who are doing this work, we are pushing in that direction bit by bit. But it begins with, I don't think I like how that sounded, what you just said to me. Can we need to redo this. Can we talk about that? I need to. And if the person is responding, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, we just got some really important information there. That's how it starts.
That was a very powerful response. I got emotional as you were explaining, divinity and voice and owning how you're feeling and your preferences. And that just rings so true. And thank you so much for that very thoughtful and in-depth response. And I love how you speak with such clarity and confidence and you're not mean about it, because I've seen instances where people are rude or it comes from like an insecurity or a fear when they're trying to stand up for themselves. And I just love that you are confident and clear, and there is a way to own that divinity and stand in who we are in a clear and kind way. Because I feel like clarity is kindness, right? So when you're asking someone, wait a second, I don't like how that felt, let's talk about this. That's a very clear and kind way to talk it out with someone and figure out where this is rooted from. And I love that there's that way to do it. And it also reminds me of what I've been learning recently about what we value in life and what we make things mean to us, and how you talk about the male opinion is is often central to what we are told or what we listen to. It's about shifting. What is it that we value? And if we value our voice, if we value our divinity, if we value and place that higher than someone else's, then I could really see the transformation happening. So thank you for calling that out and making that very clear for me. And I'm sure people listening too, it will bring a lot of clarity for them. When it comes to being mobbed and shunned, have you ever seen an instance where a family actually admits that they were doing the mobbing? Does that ever happen?
It happens that sometimes a sibling, after a few years, will call the daughter and say, I can't live without you. I have to reconnect. And they may be doing it under the radar and hiding it from parents. I mean, the parents might be elders. One of the parents may already be deceased, but they still feel that they have to keep the secret. So I have occasionally seen that. It usually is with a sister. A sister will reach out and just call out of the blue, and the targets are usually in a state of shock. Some are thrilled, and others are from the position of, I really just don't know how to go on. I mean, sure, I can forgive you, but it has so poisoned our relationship, the things that the person did to them. There may be permanent damage, particularly for parents and siblings, families who mob, who turn children against their mothers. And that bond is never really quite the same, even if the mother is reunited with her children. It's just never, they're a little bit suspicious of mom. They're a little bit not quite respectful or normal because of this contamination from the grandparents who mobbed. And that to me is so absolutely tragic, but is very common. So I would say, yes, attentively, sometimes, but the stakes are so high for even the extended family who were passive, who didn't actively do monstrous things. The stakes are high because they have to come face to face with themselves. A lot of times, these are professional people, they're formally educated, and they're saying, how did I do this? How could I have done this? I don't understand this in myself. And that is a difficult, challenging space to be in. But as I say in the book, they need to be gentle with themselves. There was a tender place in their being they were protecting by participating. And having the strength to look at that is going to help them heal. And then that's going to help them reach out to the mobbed daughter. Having a healing approach is really my recommendation.
For the cases then where I'm sure a lot don't have family members that admit to what they're doing, and they often go the rest of their life, I assume, not having that change of heart or that confrontation with them. And I know you have a chapter too about rejoining and other things in your book, but for the people who they will never get that relationship with their family, they will never get that apology or that recognition. How do you walk them through, I'm sure, the grieving process and all the emotions that go with knowing they can't have the family that they want to have?
Coming face to face with that truth and relinquishing the cherished and beloved wish of reconciliation is difficult. And what I say is, there's no guarantee of never. We don't know the future. So someone may call one day. However, it is cost prohibitive to your precious life to sit around waiting for it. And to sit around reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. Yes, we must grieve, and not to clip that in or minimize that at all, but identifying oneself as a jilted or rejected daughter, having that as the banner of your life. These are not trauma narratives that you can function well with. Finding deeply fulfilling relationships. And I have, many women have said to me over the years, I have no one. I go to work, I come home. My mother turned my children against me. I'm comatose with rage and grief. And that has got to be honored. And that woman needs held, emotionally carried and supported by as many people, and the earth and her animal companions and the spirits, God, her ancestors, everyone, to gather around her and help her through that so she does not feel alone. Meanwhile, she has got to reach out. And what I say is, if you don't come from a particular community, a faith community, or you don't have a hobby community, you're not, a biker or a knitter, you don't celebrate holidays, the Salvation Army, at least in North America, that choice is there. There are shelters for unhoused folks, for folks suffering with domestic violence and so forth. Reach out, go to these places. They need, and go and meet other people who will tell you, I have no one. This is how they feel. I have no one. That narrative of I have no one, that has got to be transformed to, no, I don't have my biological kin, but I've got everyone. And seeing that the world as a world full of love and so much goodness, that's the transformation that happens for the women who, nope, they're gonna live out their whole life, and they're never going to see anyone they have shared memories with. No one from their childhood remembers them. No one in their life remembers them as a child. No one can share memories of, oh, I remember grandpa. I remember our parent who's now deceased. There's no sharing of that. I certainly understand that, not having those memories. There isn't someone to say who remembers me or has my childhood names. And that, of course, was done by design to harm me. So how do I and how do other women do that? Well, we go to people who can give that witnessing and mirroring and love and connection and fulfillment. Oh, this is what having a family feels like. That happens. Oh, I see your emotion. I just want to honor that for you, Francesca. Thank you for witnessing and listening to me too. Thank you for that.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I thank you. I love this conversation and really just feel this like connection. And I'm so grateful that I got to meet you and have this book sitting on my desk, and I'm going to keep taking notes and reading it. And if you're listening, I'll definitely have a follow-up article and episode on my review of it, just so people can get an overview of what it is. And of course, if you're listening and the light bulb went off and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me, this is my situation, you feel like you are a victim of family mobbing, 100% get this book right now. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes. And just know that there are women like Stephanie and me and others out there who are willing to support you and be there for you and walk you through whatever it is that needs to happen. And I really just appreciate your passion and dedication, really, truly. I also had another question about when you said honoring our divinity, and just as a woman, I know you have a lot of knowledge and expertise and your whole background is in women and gender studies. Is there either a book or a place or a thing that we as women can also go to nurture that divinity, to learn more about it, to know how to express it and see it?
I recommend that we look to our own personal ancestors and the traditions of the people who raised us and their lineages, and look for that place where there was the recognition of a goddess, the divine female creatrix. She exists in everyone's lineage. If we look back far enough, the works of Carol Christ, the works of Judith Plaskow, where they are looking at female divinity, the works of Marcia Falk. These women are looking at how do we understand particularly monotheism and the monotheistic traditions in terms of including women. Women were always there. There are movements, of course, that have been in place for decades and, of course, centuries as well. Within all of those, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where we're saying we women have always been there as prophets, priests, apostles, disciples, teachers, and it's right in the historic record. And we will be glad to point that out to you. And these scholars have been doing, and lay folks have been doing that. So turning to those places as well. So you don't have to leave a tradition you were raised in at all. You can go to deeper into and look to the folks who have unearthed these women's names and say, that's my ancestor, and have that recognition and honoring. That's what I would recommend.
I wish people could see your face as you were just expressing this. You just have a joy and just such a light about you as you talk about it. So it makes me very excited to dive into all of that. All right. I appreciate the time that you've taken and spent with us. So for anyone who's listening, Stephanie, who knows that this is happening to them, who's going to get your book, who loves what you're saying, what do you hope they walk away with, or what would you say to them?
You will get through this. The pain that you are feeling right now is not forever. You are in grief, most likely, in shock, and profound disbelief. Looking at the folks in your family who are moral, kind, good people, but yet this horrific thing has happened to you. They are not mutually exclusive, so don't even try to reconcile it. They are one and the same. And keep going. You are not alone. Keep reaching out. Find folks who will believe and listen and care about your experiences, not minimize, not play a game with you, not say, be nicer, pray your way out of it, just be in the present moment, follow your bliss. Your soul signed up for this. You wanted this experience. You're in a soul group, all these little cliches that are rife in our culture today. Don't listen to that. You listen to your heart, your suffering, and that needs to be honored and recognized and expressed in a safe, loving environment. And it's there for you. Even if it's for the tree that's out front of your house, go tell the tree. Pet your dog. You're going to make it.
I love that. I feel the same way about trees. I just love them, and I love corgis. So all good things. Where can people connect with you and find you?
Sedna's Daughters webpage is one place, and North Atlantic Books at their webpage. They'll have information there.
Wonderful. We'll make sure that we link this in the show notes.
Thank you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Francesca.
If you like what you're hearing so far and feel inspired or changed or just motivated after hearing this message, please consider joining our membership. We work so hard to dissect information and make it simple and digestible for you so you can go out in the world and be a light, connect to your authentic self. And we really want to continue being that landing place for you. So if you're considering even one message or brand to support, we hope that you'll consider ours. And if you want a link for that, it is in the show notes. Now it's time for an affirmation. I am a divine spirit of God and step into a deep knowing of my worth and power. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.